Marley, go ahead and unmute yourself. I muted everybody because it was echoing.
We're good? Awesome. All right, so we're gonna get started. Does anybody have any questions or anything, any housekeeping things, Sky, that we need to go over, or we're good?
Actually, yes, thank you for reminding me. This is a very intense training. It's interactive. If at any point that you feel like it's just too much, which I can totally understand, as Marley can understand and Susan can understand, please log off, go process with somebody, do whatever you need to do, find a support. If this is in any way upsetting or triggering to you, we do not expect you to stay through the entire training.
Yes, perfect. All right, so if everyone can see the screen, so we're gonna jump right into it, hopefully. I'm also not the best at technology, so I apologize in advance. Technical issues.
Nope, you don't have anything to worry about. Just click on the next slide.
All right, so again, just going over objectives, the agenda as it were. So a little bit of a review of the definitions of domestic violence and intimate partner violence. And then we're going to go through lethality assessments and trauma-informed safety planning. And then a little bit of the Safe and Together model. This is a model that came through DCF, so it kind of touches the lives of everybody in kind of a background sense. I don't know how many people might be familiar with it, but it's good to know. It's good to have as background also. So again, a quick little overview of intimate partner violence. We use it as the broad term definition for domestic violence and dating violence. And as we know it, again, it's the presence of a pattern of abusive behaviors through the use of power and control tactics that one person uses over another in an intimate relationship. What we do know is that it's a learned behavior. It can be a coping skill, a maladaptive coping skill that somebody picked up and learned to use in order to survive, to get their needs met. But what that means for survivors can be, that's kind of the focus for this, is we're going to focus a little bit more on the survivor part of it. So I did want, by way of kind of a pretest, I wanted to see if we can brainstorm some ways of safety planning. So if you had someone who was a survivor of domestic violence, what would be some of the safety planning that you would do with them? And feel free to write in the chat box.
Well, I know that I would tell them to have a cell phone hidden in the bathroom.
Hidden in the bathroom.
That has a lock on it.
Mm-hmm.
Gather important documents.
Mm-hmm.
Hurricane bag.
I like it.
Yeah.
I know we talked briefly the last time on safety planning in general, so some of this should be hopefully a little bit of a review. I like the hurricane bag. It's a good one.
Hide those items well. Yeah, it seems like everybody feels like know when it is safe to leave.
Yep. And that's important too, because only the survivor is going to know that pattern, right? We might get really close to families and understand a lot of the dynamics, but when it comes to safety planning, that's why it has to be driven by the survivor, because they're the ones that are the experts in the life that they live, right? They're the ones that are going to know triggers and sensitive times and things like that.
Let someone know what your plan is just in case. Have a code word.
Yep.
Have a safe word or a phrase to let someone know, have a place to go. But you're getting a lot of feedback. Yeah.
And that's a big one too, to have a place to go, right? Because some people, that goes into the planning beforehand. And sometimes because there isn't a whole lot of, because you're in survivor mode, that long-term planning doesn't really kick in just yet. And that might have something to do with why the average is 7 times it takes to leave, right? Because you're in survivor mode and you don't necessarily have that long-term plan, but you're just trying to survive today. So
always keep one more. Just want to get one more in. Always keep someone in the loop of what is going on.
Yep. And we don't have to do it alone, and it's a huge role that you all as peers can play. It's a big role that we try to play as advocates, to be that person that maybe helps them think through that plan, or maybe that one person that is part of their safety plan. So one more question before we go forward. What would be some examples? We talked about risk factors and stuff briefly. What would be some of the what do you think some of the high lethality risk indicators would be? How would you be able to know if someone is in a high risk or high lethality situation? What are some of those indicators?
This might be a long shot, but I'll go ahead and give the first one.
Yeah.
That it's escalated. Oh, I like this one. Never mind. I'm taking someone else's. Gun in the home. Heightened anxiety.
Yeah.
So I was thinking like the escalation is the violence has the physical violence has escalated to strangulation.
Absolutely, yeah. Strangulation is for sure, even if it's an attempted strangulation, even if it's threats of strangulation, all of those are high lethality. Having access to weapons, for sure. Especially immediate access. So like you said, in the home, if it's present, if it's there.
I actually have a question. Does lethality, when you talk about, because I've never seen your assessment, so kind of going off the cuff here. Oh, and my camera's not even on. In the lethality assessment, does it take into consideration the external factors like loss of job or the abuser, stuff like that?
It can. So the high lethality indicators are from an assessment standpoint, they're just used to kind of separate it out to enhance the safety planning with participants around those specific things. Because what we know is that if there's a gun in the home, or if there is accessibility to a weapon like that, then the lethality increases by like 500% or something outrageous. Because if you have it, you're more likely to use it on somebody, right? If you're threatening to use it, if you've used it in the past, even to intimidate, that's the lethality of that person's situation it goes way up. Does that answer your question? Okay. You're on mute, Sky.
You shouldn't. You don't necessarily have to see us depending on what your formatting is, but the most important thing is that you see the PowerPoint. That's what you need to see. So we got a comment from Jessica. Someone else other than the victim standing up to the abuser, i.e., a family member, can increase.
It could. If someone else, it depends on the dynamic of the kind of the larger or extended family. So if no one supposedly knows about the violence between the partnership, then someone else stepping in could enrage the abusive partner and say, like, how could you tell this person? It definitely depend in that situation. It would depend on the dynamic of kind of the extended family and the support system that person has. Sometimes it helps and sometimes it doesn't. Okay, so when we talk about risk assessments, the better the assessment, the better the safety plan. So
are you moving the slides?
Yes.
Because you're not.
I'm not.
Okay, go to the side. Click on. No, okay, I'll put it back up. Okay, now it's at risk assessment. There we go. We're good.
See ya. Woo!
Is that better? Sorry, guys.
Okay, we can see.
All right, perfect. All right, so the better the assessment, the better the safety plan. So I took some of this from the lethality assessment that we do at intakes with participants. So some of the questions that we'll ask are their level of fear. How afraid of their partner are they? Because if they're not very afraid, that might mean a couple of different things. It could mean that, you know, their risk level isn't high, or it could just mean that that behavior has been normalized, and they don't necessarily see the danger that they might be in. So it's important for us to gauge their level of fear, because if they have an extreme amount of fear, that also helps us to determine the best safety plan with them. So it's one of the first questions we ask is their level of fear. And then we ask questions regarding the types of violence that maybe they've experienced in the past, or recently. So physical assault, like slapping or hitting, using household items as weapons. If we had one participant who their partner actually would throw household objects like lamps, anything that's a projectile, which is another reason why we tell people to stay out of like the kitchen, in case there is an escalation of violence, because the kitchen actually houses a lot of these household items that can be used as weapons. We ask about if there is any injuries sustained that require.
We have a question.
Yeah.
What is a locality assessment? It's actually called a lethality assessment. Can you just run through that again really quickly? What this is?
Oh, it's a risk assessment for kind of gauging and understanding the lethality of someone's situation. So what we want to do is understand kind of what risks they're facing, whether it's, and this is something we talked about last time, whether it's life-generated risks or abuser-generated risks. But either way, we need to understand what kind of this going over the abuser-generated risks. So we're understanding and getting a feel for that pattern of violence, what it looks like for them, so that we can help safety plan with them. So we go through this lethality assessment before we actually do the safety plan with them. So like I said, understanding their level of fear, understanding maybe the types of violence that they've experienced before, including household items used as weapons, if they've sustained any injuries, either requiring or not requiring medical assistance, any sort of assaults, an abuse while pregnant, and strangulation. So these two I highlighted because these two are particular to high lethality. So this would put somebody at higher risk for a lethal situation. So if they were abused while they were pregnant, even if they aren't pregnant at the moment, abuse while pregnant is a high lethality indicator for the potential risk that person can be in, right? And of course that goes back to what we were talking about last time. When a person is pregnant, they're actually almost at more risk. They're more vulnerable and they're at more risk. So if the abuse has escalated into their pregnancy, then that means that person has kind of set what's that called, precedence for where the extent of their violence can go. So it's good for us to know that. It's good for the participant to know that that puts them in a place of more risk, even if they currently aren't pregnant at the moment. And all of these things don't necessarily had to have happened within the last month. These could be things that have happened 6 months, a year, 2 years ago, but just because they happened a long time ago doesn't mean that this person's lethality is any less, right?
Abby, can you unmute yourself and ask your question, because I'm not really quite sure.
I'm not understanding what she's saying. High lethality?
Lethality.
What is it? How do you spell that?
Lethality is Lethality.
Okay, I didn't know what she was saying, so.
Like a
okay.
lethal weapon. Remember that movie?
Yes, got it. Okay.
Just like Lethal Weapon.
Thank you.
No problem. All right, so another question is other types of abusive behavior. So it might not be types of, moving beyond types of violence that they've experienced, but other maybe patterns of behavior that they've noticed. Sky, like you were saying, an escalation of violence is definitely puts them at a higher risk. If they've been violent with other people, or if they have a history of stalking or domestic violence, that would certainly put that behavior, that person at a higher risk that it has existed in the past, especially if that person, it hasn't been addressed, or if they haven't addressed that themselves, right? So substance use and unemployment. And like we talked about last time, these aren't causes of abuse. These are, unemployment, or the pressures of making ends meet, especially, we talk about COVID and changes happening with people in households. There's the stress of maybe not being able to pay your bills or having been laid off. None of those things are going to be predictors of violence. Those are just behaviors or life circumstances that we need to understand, or a participant needs to understand, that would put them at a higher risk if someone is expressing these other behaviors as well. All right, so standing alone, unemployment is not obviously that's not abusive, and you're not necessarily at risk because your partner is unemployed. But if it's partnered with some of these other things, like the escalation of violence, if they've been violent with others in the past, if they have a history, if they have a criminal history, then in that case it would put them at higher risk. It's one more stress. It's one more barrier for them to be able to cope in a healthy way. Does that make sense? I don't know. I hope it makes sense.
Yes. So what you're saying is it doesn't cause it, so it's not an excuse, not a reason. It can contribute to it if the behavior of being if the behavior of being an abuser is already there.
Right, exactly. So understanding someone's risk, understanding their situation, again, life-generated risks and abuser-generated risks, we can then safety plan with them better. It's also important to keep in mind that our safety plans, like we said last time, safety plans aren't a one and done. They're not a checklist. They're not something that we come up with and just hand somebody and say, just do this and you'll be safe. It has to be trauma informed. It has to be survivor driven. It has to be gender responsive, and it has to be culturally specific. So some of the challenges that participants might face in seeking help, like we talked about last time, some of the barriers we're being part of or identifying as part of a culture that maybe isn't used to reaching out to ask for outside help for things, or maybe their spiritual or religious belief prevents them from actually separating from their partner, especially if they're married, if they're legally married. That might be something for us to take into account, that that's not really an option for them, at least not at the moment, right? To separate or to divorce this person. It's also important to come from an area of strength and to identify and talk with that person on what their strengths, but also what are their vulnerabilities. And I always think that while it needs to be strength based, we need to have a really strong understanding of what vulnerabilities are. Does anybody know why we need to understand vulnerabilities? It's a good question for safety planning.
So that we can plan around them.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's the way the abuser, wait, hold on. Because it's the way that the abuser gets at the victim.
Exactly. Because the better that we understand the vulnerabilities, the better we can try and shore those up to become strengths, or at least so that that person, that survivor, is aware of where that person is trying to take advantage of them, right? So if their vulnerability is their immigration status, right? They can't get a job, or they can only get one and get paid under the table. That's a vulnerability, right? But that's also a place where someone who's abusive can try to squeeze in and take advantage of and exploit that vulnerability, right? Using it against them. So a part of safety planning is also understanding the vulnerabilities, but it has to come from a place of identified strengths so that they have something to move forward on. There are the strengths that exist for them to be able to plan, like how you said before, so that we can plan around them, right? There are certain things that we can't plan for, but when we go through the assessment of strengths and vulnerabilities, we learn what we can do to plan around it. Awesome. So this is a video. I don't want to mess up all the video things, but does anybody remember the movie Enough? Yeah. So we all know, so in this clip, I'm not Jennifer Lopez by any stretch of the imagination, so I'm not going to pretend to, but in this role, in this scene, this specific clip, this is where she is going to the police department after, I believe, one of the physical assaults from her husband, and she's asking about a restraining order and what that would look like. And the officer is saying, well, if someone hurt you, you would come make a report. And she says, but what if that just makes them more upset? And he says, well, you can come back and you can apply for a restraining order. And she said, well, what is that, a piece of paper? And the officer says, well, if they don't follow the restraining order, then you call us. And she basically says, a piece of paper is not going to stop this man from attacking me, and what's to stop you all from taking 10 to 15 minutes from getting here, kind of a thing. So we usually play this video in some of our trainings because it really kind of encaptures like how safety planning can be very specific to each individual situation, and especially when we work in if we work in or with the larger system, sometimes the first question when it comes to safety planning is always, well, did they get a restraining order? right? And that's not always the safest thing, right? So how somebody had mentioned before, sometimes when someone else steps in to help protect them, then it might escalate the danger of that situation, right? So getting a restraining order for a survivor might be a safety precaution, but it also might put that person at more risk, right? Just like when they leave, their chances, their lethality goes up as well.
Also, Marley, can you explain a little bit about how the alleged abuser has to be served, and then you have to keep the alleged survivor has to keep coming back to court, you know, that whole cycle?
Yeah. So I'm not. So when someone files for a restraining order, they can be granted their temporary injunction for up to 2 weeks, but they do have to come back, and the alleged perpetrator in the situation has to be served. If for whatever reason that person is not served in that 2 weeks, then they can extend the court date for another 2 weeks. And they could, I think generally in my experience with it, they really only extend it maybe like 1 or 2 times before they either drop it, because they can't serve the alleged perpetrator, or at that time something else happens, or the survivor might drop it because they have to keep going back to court. If the alleged perpetrator is served, then they both have to appear in court together to plead both of their cases, and then a decision is made on the longevity of the restraining order going forward, or whether or not it's even valid. So it is seen by the magistrate at first, and then it goes to DV court for the permanent version of it. Either way, the survivor is still encountering and still rehashing and still trying to plead their case for safety over and over again. So that is another piece to maybe life-generated risks when we try to offer, it's really easy for us to say, well, why don't you go get a restraining order? It's really easy for us to say that, but it's not so easy to actually get one. It's not so easy if you don't have representation. We have attorneys that we work with. We have an injunction for protection program that we have here at Women in Distress. And it's a team of really great attorneys, but even they sometimes aren't able to go to court with a participant. They can help them prepare, but there might not be enough evidence for an attorney to bring it to a judge, and it would almost serve them better for a participant to go and represent themselves, because they're not held to the same standard of a burden of proof kind of a thing. So sometimes, even if our attorneys can't accept the case, they will still guide them on how to go pro se, which is still really difficult to have to go by yourself without any sort of help, or especially now, because even as advocates, we aren't allowed to accompany them into court. There have been some situations, just to, throw it out there, where we've had people come into our office and sit next to us and do their Zoom court call so that we can actually be with them, or we've gotten the number so that we can be present. But it's not the same, in this day, currently, it's not the same. And survivors can end up feeling very alone in this process, where the system is supposed to protect them, and it sometimes does and sometimes doesn't. I don't know if I explained it well enough to answer your question, Sky.
Yeah, I just wanted, them to know that it wasn't just like a one and done.
No, definitely not. Okay, so continuing with trauma-informed safety planning, some strategies to reduce. What we want to do is find strategies that reduce the risk, right? We want to reduce the physical violence and other harm caused by the abuser, and we want to come up with strategies that maintain meeting the basic needs of the family. So that one of the biggest disruptions that we see are when these basic needs aren't consistent throughout the case. And this is where, for example, children get that indirect impact of what domestic violence is, or what intimate partner violence is. So when it's a disruption in their routine, if it's a disruption in childcare, if it's a disruption in their healthcare, if education gets all cross-wired and now mom's dropping you off, but dad's picking you up, and only on Tuesdays and Thursdays, all of these things have to be considered when we are trying to make an official safety plan with someone, so that they can think through all of these things. It's really hard to come up with, again, as the further we go down this rabbit hole of safety planning, the more we realize how many different ways a safety plan could go for a survivor, right? Because any of these one situations, education for children, planning for income loss, right? So maybe it was a 2-income household and now you're down to 1. All of these things are more of that long-term planning, that when someone's in survivor mode and they're just trying to live day to day, that they're not necessarily, they don't have the bandwidth to plan that far in advance because they're just trying to make it through to tomorrow. So one of the things that we do as advocates is try and help them flesh all those things out, and to be able to plan and come up with an idea of what a month from now, 2 months from now, what that would look like to be in a safe place for them, considering all of these life-generated risks and all of these abuser-generated risks.
Great.
So one of the things that, I mean, again, it's not just a checklist, and it's not just something that we make up and we give to them and say, this is it, you're going to be safe now. So what do we need to know first? We need to know better generated risks and life-generated risks. So based on the situation, safety planning can take many, many forms. Sometimes we're safety planning for when they're staying in the home. They haven't left yet, they're not ready to, they're not able to. So what does safety planning look like for someone who's still in the home and still living with someone who's abusive? It could mean getting a list of emergency numbers. It could mean flushing out what the safest room in the house is. Again, not the kitchen, generally not the bathroom either, right? Those are the 2 places that, in my experience, that those are where the most violent attacks happen. But it's also the confined space. There's no place for them to get out. There's not a second door. You know, some people don't have a second door in their bathroom. Some people do. I don't know. If you do, then maybe it's not so bad, because at least you can get out and you're not trapped. And again, like we talked about, the kitchen is not a good place to go either, because a lot of those household items can be used as weapons. You want to flesh out where do you keep your extra keys? Where do you keep your extra money and your phone? Right, Sky? Yeah. Where is it going to be? Is it going to be in your car? Is it going to be, you know, sometimes you'll hear different safety plans that say, don't keep things in your car. But sometimes that's the only place that you have. Maybe you live in your car, it's your car, you drive it to and from work, and that's your safe spot. Maybe that's your safe place. And then safety planning during drug and alcohol use. So this could also mean if it's your partners or the abusers, substance use or alcohol use, or your own, right? Safety planning for what that looks like, because there's many different ways that can look like for someone, especially when under the influence, right? And that's a vulnerability to understand for someone as well. And that's a wedge that an abuser can find to exploit, right? To make more vulnerable, to make you more exposed, right? So we have this, I don't know if y'all can see it. I'll show you, I can send it to Sky afterwards, but it's actually a book on domestic violence safety planning. I don't know if y'all can see it. But we use it for that kind of enhanced safety planning when someone has, you know, that lots of different generated risks, life generated and abuser generated risks. I just wanted to read some of the stuff. So increasing your own safety during drug or alcohol use. So some of the things for your partner's substance use, if they're abusing alcohol or substances at any time, being aware of how they act, right? They're the experts. They're going to know how that pattern of behavior. Consider how they treat you, how they treat outside people. Just being able to put it on paper sometimes can be really illuminating for people to put down that pattern on paper, right? For them to be able to start thinking about it as something to plan around, right? And so this is why like a physical safety plan can be helpful. So understanding how they treat you when they're intoxicated, how they treat other people. Do they treat you differently than they treat other people? Is it worse, or do they treat you all the same, right? Again, trying to get a grasp on what this pattern looks like. If it's your own substance use, or if they're using at the same time, what is a safe place that you can go? Who are safe people that are going to put their safety first? Who is it that they know that's committed to their own safety and not necessarily, maybe it's a mutual friend, but is that mutual friend going to throw you under the bus in that situation? Then that person isn't committed to their safety. So if you can't be with people you trust, locate, make sure that you have that in the back of your mind where you can go to, where you can get out if you really need to. If something escalates, knowing where your phone is. Asking a friend or asking somebody that you trust to be a designated driver. And then, of course, seeking help for the substance use itself. So if it's something that you want to plan for stopping the use of substances, where your children can go, how that whole safety planning around children and time sharing while you're seeking treatment, depending on the treatment, and things like that. Does that make sense? Sky, am I making sense?
You are totally making sense.
That's good. Hopefully, because it's not me, it's this book. So if this book isn't making sense, then we got problems.
Guys, I just went ahead and in the chat box attached a referral, a hard copy. Well, I guess I don't even know what a hard copy is anymore. That you can easily download from the chat box, a referral to women in distress. I'm also going to attach a couple of other items that Marley had sent over to me. So just look in the chat box so you can pull them off, okay? Go ahead, Marley, sorry.
No, you're good. Thank you. So there's the staying with or living with the abusive partner, and then there's preparing to leave. And, you know, one of the biggest parts of this is that it puts someone at a higher risk, right, of that lethality, or it just increases their danger when it's time to leave. So this is almost where the planning, if someone is preparing to leave, this is where they almost need more tangible plans, right? This is what we're going to do for this, and for what this happens, kind of like a concrete idea of what those steps are going to be. So thinking about, you know, and if anyone's familiar with like motivational interviewing, right? Like Miss Sky, think about think about the end goal and work backwards, right? Like think about what independence looks like and how are you going to get there, right? So what does independence look like for you? Is it a financial safety consideration? Do you have your own bank account? Do you have a safety plan, or I'm sorry, a savings account? And asking, is at this point in time, is a restraining order even an option? If it's not, we'll maybe think about that down the road, but if it's not, then we move forward. So is there a place to stay? Who can be part of that plan? Like someone had said before, sometimes having someone there can be helpful, sometimes it can't. So that's a question that we have to ask. Is there someone that can be part of that plan that's not going to put them at risk? Sometimes people will flee an unsafe home and go with family or friends, and will end up putting that person at higher risk because their abuser knows where that person lives, right? If it's family, if it's close friends, they might know where that person lives. So that might not be, even though they're the closest person to you, that might not actually be a safe place for you to go. So trying to plan, that person can still be part of your safety plan. Maybe they can drive you to that safe place or help you find a hotel room, but maybe staying with them might not be the best idea. So kind of fleshing those ideas out with them. Where would be the place to stay? Who would be part of your plan? Safety planning for your pets, as we talked about in the last session. Abusers, one of the high lethality indicators, and we'll talk about those in just a second, is if there's any harm or threats to harm for pets, right? They are a vulnerability. I know. They're a vulnerability, and they're also a family member. They also can't protect themselves. So if someone who is an abuser, someone who is trying to control someone else, and this other person has an attachment to one of the family pets, they might abuse the pet instead of abuse the person by a way of threatening. I don't know if I said that the right way. It could be an actual abuse of the animal, or it could be a threatened abuse of the animal. But either way, planning for what's going to happen to that pet while you're preparing to leave is important.
Another thing that you said that I want to highlight is it's not just like the physical, they not just always physically abusing the pets. One of the kids that I took in, his father would always threaten to get rid of the pets, like as a method of control.
Right. Yep. Threatening to get rid of, threatening to harm them. We've had participants with, I mean, really, really traumatic stories of things that happened to their animals. Even though they were never physically abusive, their partner was never physically abusive to them. They had, you know, their animal ended up dying because of the abuse that they sustained. So that's a huge piece that sometimes goes that's a rock that doesn't get turned over very frequently. And it's important to always understand when we're analyzing strengths and we're analyzing vulnerabilities, the children and pets are a huge vulnerability for people, for both, right? The abuser and the survivor. But in this situation, planning for what's going to happen for your pets is a big key piece. And just as a side note, at our shelter, at our emergency shelter, we do have a pet shelter. So we work with Humane Society, and they donate food and they donate care so they could get like their shots and stuff like that while they're there. So that's something that is new as of maybe like a year and a half ago, maybe 2 years ago. But they do have a standalone pet shelter as well. And so somebody had said hurricane bag. Hurricane bag is a big, big piece. One of the, I don't know if anybody has any suggestions. Someone had said important paperwork before, but what else would you put in a hurricane bag?
First aid, like a first aid kit.
Yep.
Tampons.
Sure.
I mean, what else, guys? What else would you put? Just think that even
phone numbers.
Oh, what did you say, Miguel?
Emergency contact numbers.
Mm-hmm.
Clothing.
There was we had a participant one time. While you guys are adding these, please continue to add them. These ideas are worth sharing. But we had one participant one time in a training who she came up with her own code to keep track of the abuse. So she would have kind of an agenda, and instead of putting like today the fight escalated and this happened, right? She came up with basically her own vocabulary and alphabet, and came up with her own code for her to decipher and to keep track of the abusive behavior. So she could know when it was escalating. She had specific days for when she maybe had to go to court, and write it in a restraining order petition. So keeping a journal of sorts, you wouldn't think would be something to keep in for your safety, but sometimes it could be the most useful, especially when you're moving forward in the criminal part of things, when you're pressing charges or when you're going through the dependency system also.
So we got a lot of really good feedback here. Flashlight, clothing, batteries, external chargers, which I hadn't even, a lot of portable batteries, charging the phone, water, walkie-talkie, spare keys, blanket, jacket, or cell phone, money. That's a really practical one that I didn't even think of.
Yep.
These are all really, really great responses.
Yep.
And to piggyback off what Marley was saying about keeping a journal, I know we're all familiar with this case, but the Lorena Bobbitt case, when you got through all of like the stuff around the whole penis thing, she really was very, very much abused. And it was having someone that she worked with who would, on her agenda, like on her book, would write when Lorena would come in to the nail salon to do nails, like, okay, black eye today, this today, this today. And her testifying and showing that document really helped her case.
Absolutely.
Ricardo said worst case scenario, maybe pepper spray.
Sure.
I think everybody should.
Yeah, that should just be on hand all the time. Just kidding. So some of the other things, I know we mentioned important documents, but for example, if you are married, having your marriage certificate or even your divorce decree, any sort of paperwork that tracks your status, right? So whether it's your immigration paperwork, or your marriage certificate or license, your passports, any sort of identification, your children's identification, medical records,
Birth certificates.
sure, insurance papers.
These are all the groups. These are all the groups coming up with good ideas. Medication.
Yep, extra medications, spare keys, extra monies, anything that has your name on it, really, as a document. So if it's a bank statement,
that paperwork or whatever property you own in your name.
Exactly. Yep. I think this is, I mean, it's amazing. It's funny because maybe we don't think about it all the time, but these are things that when you have to sit down and safety plan with someone, there's so much to plan for, right? It is not easy to try to leave. So when someone says, why don't they leave? There's so much planning that goes into leaving, and it's not, first, that's the wrong question, right? Second,
basic hygiene, toothbrush, paste, deodorant.
Yep.
I mean, yeah, there's so much.
Yep. Some of the other things that we don't think about that might be like secondary is if you have children and you're leaving with children, things of comfort for them. So blankets, or toys, and even pictures or books for them. I know that Patricia, who works at CPIS, Patricia and some of the other CPI advocates that were there or are still technically there, but virtual, when children were removed, having a backpack or having something that wasn't a trash bag that had all of their things in it could make the world of difference to a child. Something of comfort while things are in extreme transition for them. And something else too is small sellable items. So if you have jewelry, just in case you need to sell it and move forward or move on, things that you can pawn, things you can make money off of, things like that, just in case. Those are some of the things that we don't that aren't maybe like critical, but could really help in a pinch and make a difference for somebody. Preparing to leave. So anything, I like how you all were talking about the, you know, the employment, right? So making sure that you're talking with your employers about either whether it's a restraining order or it's, you know, just you having to leave, and that what that pattern of behavior might escalate to while you're leaving, and how they might show up at your work, or they might try to find you. It's, you know,
Terry did say in the chat, you know, they'll try to sabotage your employment, you know, showing up, calling incessantly. Now, I know that it's illegal to fire someone due to being in a domestic violence situation. And I used to tell my moms and dads that, which just is so stupid because, I mean, yeah, okay, it's illegal, but they're going to find another reason, or they're going to cut your hours. Right. So me being a young social worker, I wasn't thinking.
But it's good to know that it's there, but also how we have to work around it, right? It's going to happen. It's going to come up. They're going to find one reason or another. And if they don't do it directly at work, then they might, you know, sabotage the way that you get to work. We had a participant who recently applied for financial assistance because her partner slashed all 4 of her tires. So 4 tires is pretty expensive. That's quite a blow, especially if your, you know, hours are cut and you're not going to, you know, you don't have that many hours at work. That's a huge blow. That's at least, I don't know, 2 months of a utility bill, or at least 1 utility bill, half of rent, you know, for some people.
And it's really hard to slash tires nowadays, guys. No, I'm serious. Like someone, okay, it is though.
Guy.
Because someone tried to do it to me, a domestic violencer, and he couldn't do it.
Well, that's good. You have some pretty nice tires then. So yeah, and I think that we talked about it last time, but we call it a hurricane bag, not because we use it explicitly for hurricanes, but in case the abuser stumbles across it, maybe you stuff it under the bed. What do you want to call it? You want to call it something innocuous, right? Oh, this is the hurricane. It's hurricane season. It's a hurricane bag. Pull the attention away from your go bag. And then there's also safety planning for after you've left, right? So there's the pre or the during you're living with, you're experiencing it daily, how to plan for that, how to plan to leave, and then how to plan for after you've left. And that includes considerations for your social networking, right? We all like to, well, I don't know about all of us, but some people like to, you know, express a lot of their feelings publicly on social media about maybe feelings of, you know, maybe they're happy, or maybe they're excited, or maybe they've moved to this new place, and without knowing it, we're giving, you know, we might be giving someone our location, we might be giving someone a pattern of our activity, for them to be able to then follow you.
Check-ins and stuff, you know?
Yeah, I don't know if it's just me, but I haven't seen check-ins in a while, which is a relief because that always freaked me out, just in general. I don't know why anybody needs to know where anybody is all the time, but that's just me. Securing your new home. So if you've moved into a new apartment or a new home, making sure that it's safe. Do you have security measures? Do you have a security system? Do you have the ring? Do you have extra locks? Did you change the locks on your existing house because now your abuser was forced out, right? If your name was on the lease and he was the abuser and you've had him removed from your property, did you change the locks? Did you increase the safety measures at your own home, right? Safety planning around children and time sharing. So what does that look like for when you have to do the drop-offs? The state of Florida recognizes that legal fathers and legal mothers, they have 50% custody. They have rights, right? And they have the right to see them until a judge says otherwise. So we have to safety plan, and as a survivor, I mean, I've seen it numerous times where survivors are put in a situation to have to confront their abuser in order to exchange their children, right? There's no third party person put in the middle, and they have to, and they have to make that happen, right? Whether they want to or not. And again, asking yourself, is a restraining order an option? Is a restraining order something that is feasible at this juncture, right? And then reaching out for that emotional support. So having that network of people that understand what you've been through, but also can help you process it, right? And that could be professionally, that could be through peers, it could be through friends and family, but people that understand what it is that you've gone through and how that can, and understand what you might need in order to feel safe moving forward. So I have this activity, and I'm going to try to, we're going to try to do it again. So we're going to talk about Miss Ashley. It's another scenario for another teenager, but this time I actually have them on slides, so I'm going to try to share them with you so that you can read them along with me. Let's see if I can make it happen. Did I not do it?
No.
You might just have to read it. Oh, something happened. Oh, yep, got it, Marley. Good job.
Yay! I did it. Don't think, I mean, it's not me, it's everyone else around me. I have a really good support group here that helps me. All right, so this is Ashley. I'm going to read it just in case, but so that you guys can either read along with me or have it for reference also. So this is Ashley. Again, we're going to put ourselves in the mindset of Miss Ashley Marie Carlson and try and make decisions. We're going to try to go with her through her decision-making process, at least somewhat. Right. Sky, how are we doing on time?
We have an hour.
Okay. So we got some time. All right, so Ashley. I'm Ashley, and I live with my parents and my sisters. I am the oldest. Next time I blow out my candles, I'll be 17. Carolee is 14, and Jenna is 11. I guess you can say that we pretty much live in the country. My dad's a mechanic and can fix anything. Pickup trucks, tractors, American cars, foreign cars. He's really good. My mom does hair at a salon in town. She used to practice on me and my sisters. LOL. After I graduate, I want to be a flight attendant and travel, travel, travel. Flight attendants get to help people. They help you feel comfortable and relaxed, and I'm good at that. In my room, I have posters of the Eiffel Tower, the canals of Venice, and Buckingham Palace. I've gone out with a few boys, like to the movies and stuff, but nothing more. Like Pastor Thomas says, a woman's body is a flower that only blooms in holy matrimony. And then I met Jimmy. He's totally cute and smart. I know we've only been together for 1 month, but I'm pretty sure he's the one. Oh my God, don't get me started. I could talk about him all day. So then we have the together card. Hold on, let me see if I can find it. This is where things get challenging. Okay, together card 1. Jimmy's parents are at work and he asks you to cut school and watch a movie with him in his room. At first you don't want to, but then he asks you what you really learned at school anyway, and you had to admit not much. Jimmy's lit all the candles, like 50 of them. It's so beautiful and sweet. Soon you're kissing and it feels great, and everything's going just right. Jimmy takes off your shirt, and it's thrilling and scary at the first time. He undoes your bra, and then his fingers go to your jeans, and you say no. You push his hands away. He says, come on, baby, and you say, please, no. He says, you'll like it, I promise. Then, Saved by the Bell, your cell phone rings, and you jump to get it. It's your mom. You throw your shirt back on, and Jimmy's laughing. He calls you a tease, and you're not really sure what to say, so you just tell him that you need to go home. And he says, fine, as long as I get to see you tomorrow. So if you want to go talk to your friends as Miss Ashley, or do you want to go home to your mom, we'll pick the family card. What do we think?
Are you talking to your family if you go home? Or just
Not
going to
necessarily.
dinner?
No, you just go home and go to dinner.
Okay. We've got one, talk to friends. Friends. Friends, friends. Friends.
Friends?
Yeah, consensus seems to be
All right, friends.
friends, yeah.
So you go to the diner where Chelsea works and you wait for her break. He makes me feel like I'm the only girl in the whole world. Oh my God, Ash, you're so lucky. Yeah, the only thing is, he's older and I think he wants to, do more. You mean you haven't done it yet? You blush. Of course not. And he's still waiting around for you? That's true love, Ash. But even the best guy thinks with their, they can't help it, Chelsea. All I'm saying is that you can't expect him to wait around forever. We don't have a choice in this one. We just go to family. So you're making a salad when you tell your mom, I met someone. Really? Do we know him? No, but he's really nice. You'd like him a lot. You start telling her about him, and she's really listening to you for the first time in a while. I'm so happy for you, Ash. He sounds great. You sense a tinge of sadness when you say that. What's wrong, Mom? Oh, nothing, honey. It's just, well, I remember when I was that excited. You mean about Dad? Yeah, when we met, it was really something. I miss how we used to be. I know we just seemed like two old fogies to you girls, but your dad and I had something really special back then. He used to pick me up from work and take me dancing. You can't imagine their relationship being different. It seems like Dad has always been mean to her. You're glad to hear it wasn't always that way, and you wish that you could get a chance to see that side of him. Do you want to go call Jimmy or go do your homework?
Call Jimmy.
Call Jimmy?
Yeah, I'm not getting any parent or do homework. Call Jimmy, yeah.
All right, so you're about to call Jimmy when you see that he's texted you like 50 times. Things like at 4:32, I miss you, sweets. 4:38, where are you at? 4:45, who are you with? 4:52, question mark, question mark. 5:43, Ash. 6:01, call me. You call him and you flirt on the phone, talking about nothing and everything at the same time for 2 hours. He says he's desperate to see you and tells you to sneak out of your house when your parents go to sleep. It's a full moon tonight and you could just go for a walk together. He just wants to wrap his arms around your waist and tell you that you're beautiful. He makes you feel so special, as if you're the most amazing girl in the world. Do you go see him, or you tell him you can't and then you go do your homework?
Hold on, they're coming in quickly. Hold on. We got one homework. But mostly go see him.
Mostly go see him?
Yeah. We got one homework though, so you were definitely a good student.
See, somebody.
Someone said, "Dad sound mean. I'm staying home."
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, but it seems to be the consensus is sneak out.
All right. So you slip out of the door in the basement, and wow, Jimmy was right. The moon is beautiful. You see him at the end of your driveway, and his eyes sparkle. He drives you to the park by the lake. He's brought you a whole midnight picnic. Champagne, strawberries, chocolate. He's so sweet. You can't wait to tell Chelsea. Even though you don't drink, you don't want to ruin the mood. Everything starts to feel strange. And then you're making out, and Jimmy moves to your jeans. Jimmy, no, please stop. You'll like it, I promise. This is all happening really fast. What about protection? We don't need that. I'll always take care of you. No, I'm serious, and you try to get up. I'll pull out, I promise, I promise. You wanted to stop, but he did so much to make the night special, and you wonder if it means you said yes since you asked about condoms. Wow. What is happening? Did you share your screen?
Nope.
Is someone sharing their?
Nope.
What is happening?
Just put your stop sharing and then share again your scenario.
Whoa, that's new. Is that better?
Yep.
Okay. So now we're moving on to the post-peer
But what
pressure.
happened? Like,
Well,
did she have sex with him?
it appears so. It appears as though she felt guilty and
That's rape.
well, she's also, was it 15? Maybe it's her first time and she feels guilty and she, there's a lot in it. There's a lot to this whole story. So family card 2. At dinner a few weeks later, everyone can tell that Dad is in one of his moods. At first you think he's mad at you, that he can somehow tell, and that he knows that you've been having sex with Jimmy ever since that time in the park. But that must be your own guilt, because after dinner, it's Mom he's yelling at. You and your sisters sit in the family room pretending to do your homework while they go to the kitchen. How much did that dress cost me? Your father yells. I bought it with my own. You look like a slut in it. You're not 22 anymore. Who are you dressing for anyway? Bob, don't be ridiculous. I'm being ridiculous? I'm not wearing that thing. Look at what kind of example you're setting for your daughters. Do you go in the kitchen and try to calm your dad down? Or do you go to your room and you call Jimmy?
Oh, we got one family. We got another calm Dad down. We got one call Jimmy. Calm Dad down, family. Give me a minute. I want to see what the consensus is.
Yeah.
Because we only have 2 call Jimmys. Calm Dad down again. Call Jimmy. 1, 2, 3. Okay, let's go with calm Dad down.
Calm Dad down. So you walk into the kitchen and pretend that you haven't heard a thing. You pour yourself a glass of milk and force yourself to act calm. Dad, can you help me with my math homework? I have a big test tomorrow. A long, tense silence. Both you and your mom are holding your breath. He's either going to explode, this time at both of you, or the episode will be over. I'll talk to you later, he says to your mom. Bring your homework to the family room, honey. You and your mom exchange glances briefly before she turns to the sink to finish dishes. You go to your room later and you call Jimmy and see that he's texted you. 7:46. Look under your pillow. You look around the room, half expecting to see Jimmy walk out of your closet. Your pillow looks strangely large. What could Jimmy have done? You feel a little scared, and your heart starts to pound. You fish a box out of your pillowcase. Inside is a note that says, "You're so beautiful. Now I can see you even when we're not together. He bought you a webcam." Your cell rings, and it's Jimmy. You're not sure you want to answer, but then you have this weird feeling like maybe he would know that you were standing there in your flannel pajamas and not answering the phone on purpose. Do you want to answer the phone? Or ignore it, shake it off, and do homework?
This is a hard one. Uh, hold on, let me. We're getting some answers. Yeah. Yeah, I'm torn between the two, but I guess answer. Um, answer and tell them the camera is no answer. No. It's okay. Answer.
Answer the phone. Hi, Jimmy. Hi, sweetie. Did you look under your pillow yet? Yeah. Do you like your gift? How did you get into my house? After a pause, he says, Love has its ways. It was killing me that I couldn't see you at night. Now, even when we're not together, I can see you. You lift the small camera out of the box. It's kind of creepy. If you mount the camera on your desk and point it towards your bed, I can see you when you sleep. But that's a little weird. He laughs and says, But you're my baby. I need to see my baby to be able to sleep at night. I know you'll do this for me, right? What if my parents find it? You could take it down in the morning. I don't know. Just try it tonight, please, for me.
You know, I gotta say, this is a real life scenario that I just heard about. I was talking to my 19-year-old, and he's got a friend that's a female that is like always on the FaceTime, like has to always be, even if they're not talking, on FaceTime with the boyfriend.
Right.
It's crazy.
Yeah, and so just to interject really quick, all of these scenarios, so this is the teen version that's called In Their Shoes. There's also a In Her Shoes that was originally created, and I think it was the Washington Coalition Against Domestic Violence, the Washington State, and they're all based on real scenarios, whether they're specific or kind of a mix of different scenarios. They're a compilation of real events and real shared experiences.
So your two options. I'm sorry, was someone talking? Your two options here. People are actually going with a third option. They want to tell their family. This is really scary, and I want to tell my family what's going on. I got one call Chelsea, but mostly people are like, "This is scary. Tell your family."
Right. So because we don't have a family option,
we'll go with call Chelsea, I guess.
Maybe we'll go with the school because that's just kind of not, or maybe we tell Chelsea because we're not telling family. Or tell Chelsea. We're telling somebody.
I don't know. Yeah, sure. Tell Chelsea.
Let's tell someone.
Tell Chelsea, yeah.
So Chelsea says, I think it's romantic. That he wants to watch me while I sleep? It's not creepy? He seems like such a great guy, Ashley. I think he just really loves you. It's nothing like Brandon. Remember, he kept sneaking pics of me on his cell when I was taking a shower, and that's when I dumped him. He broke into my account and posted them on my own profile and wrote that nasty stuff about me. Remember? That's creepy. No arguing there. You do love Jimmy and you know he loves you, but something just isn't right about all of this. You get off the phone and you look over to your math homework for one final time before you go to sleep. The first few questions on the math test are easy, but then you start to feel sick, like the time you ate clams at the fair with your sisters and the three of you spent the night throwing up. Gross. You need to go to the bathroom now. Miss Callahan tells you to wait until the test is over. You know my rule, you can't leave the room and continue the test. You're old enough to hold it in for for 10 more minutes. But I'm gonna be sick, you whisper. Then your test is over. You leave the test on your desk and run to the bathroom. I think I ate something bad, or maybe it's one of those 24-hour things you explain. Miss William runs down the list of questions without even looking at you. Nauseous? Yes. Tired? Yes. Huh. Frequent urination? Yes. Breast tenderness? Is a little personal? Breast tenderness, she repeats in the same bored tone, this time a little louder. Yes. Sexual intercourse within the past month. You blush and you feel your throat close. Miss William finally looks up at you. You girls are all the same. You go and you have sex without protection, and then you're just as shocked when you end up pregnant. She passes you a card. This clinic will give you a test and help you with your prenatal care, but I can tell you now, this isn't a 24-hour virus. Praying you don't run into anyone you know, you go to the drugstore and buy a test. God answers your prayer and the clerk scans it without even looking at you. Then you pray even harder when you take the test. This prayer, God doesn't answer. You are pregnant. Do you go home or do you call your Aunt Clara? I think Aunt Clara is like an extended family that's maybe not involved in the crazy.
Yeah, we're getting some responses. Hold on, give me 30 more seconds and I'll be able to. Auntie, please help me. Yeah, the consensus is call Aunt Clara.
Call Aunt Clara. Even though Aunt Clara lives in the city an hour and a half away, she offers to come and meet you that afternoon. She takes you to the diner 2 towns over so you'll be less likely to run into someone you know. Even so, you recognize 2 of the waitresses and the guys at the gas station. You know, you don't have to keep it, Aunt Clara says. I had an abortion when I was 21. You sigh. Maybe this is why your dad calls Aunt Clara, your mother's sister, a sinner. But you think it's more because she moved to the city by herself and doesn't seem to care what other people say about her. But Aunt Clara is really good at listening. You wish that you would talk to her earlier before you got caught up in this mess. You go through the next few weeks and a days, you finally decide that you can't keep this a secret much longer. So you're not ready to tell your parents, but you're gonna tell Jimmy.
Jimmy's gonna make her keep it.
Jimmy looks surprised and happy to see you at his house in the middle of the afternoon, but he can tell that you're upset and gives you a big hug. What's the matter? You burst into tears and you tell him the news. But that's great news, he says. You just look at him. Now we'll be together forever. We can move away from this shithole and you can raise our beautiful baby and I'll get a job and my family's going to kill me. He hugs you again. Baby, I'm your family now. Don't worry about them. Jimmy seems so excited, but you still feel like your life is over. You had no intention of telling your parents yet, but your mother asks you like 5 times what's wrong with you, and you burst into tears. You're pregnant, aren't you? She says. You look at the floor at a mission of guilt. I'm so disappointed in you, your mom says. I thought you were smarter than this. Who is he? Sorry. What the hell is wrong with you? Your father yells. You think you hear him whisper, filthy slut, under his breath. What were you thinking? You just thought everything was so perfect that this couldn't happen? Haven't you learned anything from us? You're crying and they're yelling and at you and at each other. What seems like forever, you see your sister. After what seems like forever, you see your sisters in the doorway. Go upstairs, your father yells to them. What kind of example do you think you're setting for your sisters? I can't even stand to look at you anymore. You're a disgrace, Ashley. Your father shoves you aside and leaves the room. You're stunned and you look to your mom for help, but she won't even meet your eyes. You feel like an outcast in your own home. You don't know what else to do, so you call Jimmy. Hang tight, baby. Hide a suitcase tonight, and maybe we'll get it tomorrow when your parents are at work. I already told my parents, and they said you can live with us. You mumble, okay, but you feel totally numb. You try not to cry the next evening when Jimmy's mother shows you around their dingy kitchen and gives you a long list of do's and don'ts. Once you're in Jimmy's room, he shows you his closet. Look, I pushed over all my clothes to make room for yours. Even our clothes will be together now. Do you want to unpack and try to make the best of it, or call Aunt Clara?
Coming in. Hold on. Call Aunt. Yep.
Call Aunt Clara.
Auntie. Yep. Yeah, call Aunt Claire. That's the one.
All right. Jimmy says he wants to keep a close eye on you and his baby, so he doesn't want you leaving his room. You call Aunt Clara sitting on the edge of his bed. You tell her what happened. I'm so sorry, Ashley. I'm so very, very sorry. If I thought I could talk some sense into them. She tells you that you can stay with her anytime you want for as long as you want. I can come tonight, she says. You look up and you see that Jimmy has stored your suitcase on the top shelf of his closet where you can't reach it. Thank you, but I'm all right. You know you can call me anytime, day or night. I mean it. Thank you. Oh, and make sure you start getting regular prenatal checkups. Prenatal what? Jimmy chimes in. Doctor's visits for the baby. I'm on it. Our first one is tomorrow. Jimmy's on it. We tell Aunt Clara. Good. Good. So at this point, I just want to ask a question before, since we don't have an option, but how would you be safety planning with Miss Ashley? What are some things right off the bat that we would be safety planning with her?
How to get a minute of privacy away from him so that you can call your aunt. But yeah, keeping aunt up to date.
Yep.
Set up a code word for help.
Mm-hmm.
Sonia said this is the honeymoon. This is called the honeymoon phase. Hold on. She needs to confide in a family member while she's at the hospital. Oh, while she's at the hospital, and she needs to talk to the doctor alone. Jackie, I didn't even think about that.
Mm-hmm. That's a really good one.
Yeah. Getting her to recognize her feelings, not Jimmy's. Agreed. Keeping aunt included. Yeah. Jackie,
Yep.
this is an excellent. This could be really good one. Like she could talk to the doctor alone, and they do screen. Yeah, I like that one.
Yeah,
They're all
because she
great,
has
but
time
I just
to
never thought about it.
So I feel like the best option is while she's at a doctor's office, she can talk to the doctor since she can't have no privacy with him. And that way, if the doctor needs to report anything, the doctor is the best person to report it, since she is obligated to report if anything was to happen to her.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So making it kind of involving Aunt Clara, but also maybe your medical person. I like it. So we think about the lethality indicators. Do we have any red flags that are sticking out to you all at this point?
Yes. I mean, yes. His excitement about the baby at such a young age is a huge indicator.
Well, for me, it's not so much the excitement, but the now we're going to be together forever
True.
piece.
She's 16 with her parents thinking she is a tram. Miguel, what's a tram? Anyway, custody issues, obsession and controlling,
Mm-hmm.
some red flags. The closet thing is really odd too. Even our clothes can be together.
Yeah, that's that obsessiveness. What about her parents' relationship?
Very true, because her dad is verbally abusive, and yeah, no support we got. She has no support from her parents.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, Sonia said no support from her parents. She doesn't have good role models. Everything about Jimmy was suspect from the start.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Jimmy's the camera, the visual.
Webcam, yeah.
That's
Her
usually
parents are upset, which is understanding, but they need to sit her down and talk to her. Very low self-esteem on both their parts, probably, Sonia.
Yeah.
Yeah, we got a lot of red flags coming in.
So we're gonna skip school, but Jimmy and Aunt Clara seem to think it's okay to go to your doctor's visit. So we're in the doctor's office. The nurse asks you a lot of embarrassing questions, and you wish that Jimmy wasn't there, but you're afraid to ask him to leave. Age of first menses, what? What? That's your first period, baby. Oh, 12. Date of your last period, you pause to think. Jimmy replies, April 13th, the Thursday. How? I did my homework, he said, smiling. This dad's a real keeper, the nurse says. Mostly with the young ones like you, the dad is MIA. You're a lucky lady. It's still early when you leave the clinic. Jimmy wants to take you back to his house. Do you go with Jimmy, or do you ask him to drop you off at school?
Hold on, they're coming in quick. Give me a second.
Patricia's coming. She said hi. Patricia says hi.
Hey, Patricia.
She just came from another training.
School, drop me off. School. One, go with Jimmy. School. He planned her pregnancy. He's a creep. I agree. School, go to social worker or guidance office.
Mm-hmm.
Poor girl, even the nurse was toxic. That's a good point because, like, so then how can she, yeah.
So that brings up the point where we might say safety planning has to adjust, right? If we were talking to Ashley before this appointment, we would say, hey, maybe talk to your medical person, like whoever that is. And then you get a conversation like this that happens, and now you don't necessarily have that support anymore. Right? So the people involved in your safety plan, the circle shrink a little bit. So I think most everyone said school.
Yes.
So can you drop me off at school? Jimmy says, why, Ash? He doesn't look at you. What's the point? Just get your GED. It's not like you're going to graduate next year anyway. Plus, if you go to work before you get too big, we can save for our own place. Jimmy, I want to finish school. I said no. Look, Ash, you can't be selfish anymore. You have to think about what's best for all of us. For the baby, for me. You drop the subject, but later that day, you sneak your cell phone into the bathroom and you call Aunt Clara. You ask her to pick you up the next morning at school. You tell Jimmy that you have to go to school to officially withdraw, and he says he'll pick you up at lunch. Aunt Clara is waiting for you at school. You run to her car and you get in. Who knows what the future holds for you, but you're already feeling better. Aunt Clara gets on the freeway, driving east. It's a beautiful day. It's a nice way, sort of, for the
Wait,
ending.
yay! So she escaped with Clara?
She escapes with Aunt Clara. What? So it's as someone who might have interjected or crossed her path at some point, maybe if we were friend Chelsea, maybe that would, I mean, Chelsea didn't do a great job of really understanding the situation. She was more kind of in her own realm, right? And sometimes we find that to be true, that people that we reach out to can't really move beyond their own experiences to really help us objectively look at and strategize for our own situation. So that's why it's also important to keep planning, and that safety planning and that assessing kind of always has to take place in the moment, in real time, because things like that can definitely change. Anybody have any thoughts or feelings about Ashley's story?
Everybody's very happy that Ashley had her aunt to support her. Those are the comments I'm getting.
Me too. That one.
It's really sad that she was let down by so many professionals. I mean, yeah, families are families. They're going to react irrationally. But, you know, the nurse wasn't supportive at all, didn't screen for DV. The doctor didn't screen for domestic violence, which is supposed to be a part of your screening. It's just, she was let down by every professional. And then we're getting comments, so they're saying that's why it's key to have a good support system. It's definitely hard to go through something like that without support.
Do we know, like, all this? How old was Jimmy? Did we ever get that information?
He's not in high school.
Because
Jimmy-
I know he's not in school because she was still in school. So he
So-
was older.
Yeah, these cards actually have the abuser side of it. It just takes a longer time to kind of do both sides. So I usually just don't go over that part. But there is like a little sub story for Jimmy. Jimmy's 21 next month.
Okay, see that changes the whole that changes the whole thing. If he's
Well,
21 and
Miguel,
his
why do
mother's
you
like,
think that changes the whole thing?
whoa, she's 15 or no, she's 16, depending on the state. That's statutory. And everything.
Yep, she's 16 and he's 20.
Because she hasn't turned 17 yet.
Right. Yep.
Power dynamic issue. Yeah.
Oh, I don't like my feet touching the ground.
Huh?
I don't like my feet touching the ground.
Take your shoes off. Put your feet on.
Miguel, put yourself on mute.
Clean.
Your feet touching the ground.
Um,
It'll help you. Relax your feet.
Yeah, Jimmy's 21, and he had to like move back in with his parents in the basement. He's not doing okay. He doesn't see like how somebody else said that it's probably both sides has that lack of self-esteem. It doesn't seem like Jimmy has found a lot going on for him either.
Does it say he saw abuse when he was younger?
I don't think it does. No.
Okay.
Nope. No, it does say that he's, very intrigued with Ashley and she's the one bright spot in his life. Which again, a lot, that's something that as we're taught as kids, or at least, on a larger societal level, we're taught that having someone who thinks that we're the best thing ever and that we're the reason for living and all of that, that's supposed to be romantic. Like Chelsea said, like, oh, that's so cute. He wants to watch you all the time. That's romantic. And so you can see where kind of the societal pressures influence our decision making. It's not just we're objective, we're here on the outside, and that happens with everybody. We're only here objectively, we're not in it. But when you do this activity, you're making the decisions as that person. You're getting to see just how difficult it can be because you're weighting all of these other factors, right? You're weighting what you should do, what your parents are going to think, what's going to happen here, who do you have to talk to. All of these things play into it, which makes safety planning that much more unique to each person.
I call it the fairy tale syndrome. We often, with the movies and the things that our kids watch growing up, it's ingrained in us that, the man's gonna come and save us, knight in shining armor, kiss us while we're sleeping, which is kind of scary because that's not cool, and take us away and live happily ever after. And that's just not the reality. And then even in like romantic comedies, that we see, which I refuse to watch, it is a big systemic issue, and it's just so sad what we're teaching our young men and women.
One of the sessions that we do, our group is a domestic violence transformations group that we started offering through ChildNet, but now it's offered it took over our DV 101 group, where it's basically like, this is what it looks like. This is what power dynamics look like. This is what the root, like kind of naming the thing that you've been living with. And once you give it a name, it becomes something you can then plan around, right? So we have this like psychoeducational support group that we tailored to ChildNet and CPIS that now we use for everybody. But in one of the sessions, we dive into that power and control dynamic that is kind of like, where does that come from? How do we understand why do we think that we need to be not as strong or taken care of or have somebody that we depend on? So kind of analyzing the larger picture of where those thoughts and those beliefs come from as anybody, you know?
And I also think a big piece we're missing as a society is, and I'm not saying that women can't be abusers, but parents don't often talk to their boys as they grow up about, treating women with respect and things of that nature, or even look at like warning signs that their sons or daughters could be a abuser.
Right. Exactly.
Like Maria said hers, she said mine is a generational curse. So yeah.
And it's definitely when it happens in that way, it becomes very normal, right? Oh, good. I like it. It's hard to do, to step out of that, because it becomes very normal, right? And we could see that becoming super normal with Ashley, right? But she had an Aunt Clara. Not everybody has an Aunt Clara. Not everybody has an aunt that steps in with that non-judgment and shares their experience and just understands them and their reality. Like, she didn't say anything about how weird or creepy Jimmy sounded. She was like, okay, well, just you tell me what you need and I'll be here for you. So in a way, hopefully we can all be someone's Aunt Clara at some point, and be that person that steps in with suggestions and options and opportunities, but never judgment and force, right? That's the idea. We can all be like Aunt Clara.
Thank you for pointing that out, because I would have been way overbearing as Aunt Clara, and I would have been like, okay, let's go get you that abortion right now, and you're coming to live with me. So I think it's important that you pointed out that you can't do that you have to be open and wait for the person to come to that conclusion. Because yeah.
Well, that's the thing, is we want to like, oh my God, I know what's going to happen, but checking in with ourselves with that empowerment model, right? It's not our life, and ultimately, especially if someone is in an abusive relationship, the decision-making power has been taken from them. And so we don't want to continue taking decisions from them. So we want to honor their decision, whatever that is.
Well said.
Yeah, see, what's crazy is that I'm at my dad's house and he's an ex-abuser and everything. Like domestic violence was like there, and I'm listening to this and he's listening to this whole scenario, and like he was sitting there, and I when I walked away, I went to the bathroom to blow my nose, and I came back and he had turned and he was like really engaged and like listening to what you guys were talking about. So it's like, and so it's crazy, like some of the scenario was my sister's, like she got pregnant at 15, but unlike that, my mother was like allowed her to marry her husband who was over 21 and everything, and then but we kept her in our care and took care of her son, and then he took my nephew away when she couldn't to control, and like threw him way far away into Louisiana so she couldn't get hold of him. It was crazy.
Thanks for sharing, Miguel.
But it was good that my dad got to hear this.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I mean, it's interesting because I don't think, people who have the experience of being the abuser and have that life experience of being in the other side of things, that, I mean, they've been through their own stuff, right? Like they've experienced their own normalization of that behavior, for better or for worse,
Yeah, I came from our grandfather.
And that's that generation that you were talking
who had he had 18 children by 10 different wives. Or 10 different girls, women, not wives, women.
That's a busy life.
Yeah.
Miguel, thank you for being so open and like, I know that's part of your recovery process, but you really told us a lot, and I just really appreciate it.
Yes, thank you.
So it's crazy. I'm sure he's gonna want to talk about that when we get in there.
Yeah. But I mean, that's where it starts, is that building empathy and understanding, right?
Yeah, but he's still controlling. Like he's like telling me to put my feet on a pillow.
Oh, that's that. Oh,
I'm like, I don't want my feet on the pillow. I'm like, I'm okay. I'm like, I'd rather have my shoes on. Like, and he still tries to have that little bit of control with all of us. And I'm like, we're grown. I'm like, go to your room. Which is crazy.
You're telling him what to do.
And so, I know. Oh.
Well, hopefully it's a good conversation, and hopefully at least it's enlightening.
Yeah, all of our conversations are decent now. So.
yeah. Is it gonna be okay, Miguel?
Who?
You.
Yeah. Oh yeah, yeah.
Okay.
I'm perfect. Like, I'm here with
Okay.
like my grandma's right over here. I'm gonna go see her for a little bit.
Nice.
I'm visiting family
Okay.
this week.
Just wanted to check in, make sure.
Yeah.
Marley, we have less than 15 minutes left.
Okay. So I'm gonna save some of this maybe probably for next time then, because it goes a little bit more into like the official side of safety planning and kind of documenting when we're working in the system, as opposed to just kind of that relational piece. But just to briefly go over that safe and together model. So David Mandel, kind of this is their idea of how the system can respond better to families that experience intimate partner violence and domestic violence. So, I mean, I don't have other examples of what other nations, but it is an internationally recognized set of tools and interventions designed to help child welfare professionals become domestic violence informed. So it takes on the perspective of intervening and holding perpetrators or alleged perpetrators and abusive parents accountable for their actions, while putting children at the center, like children's well-being and their safety in the middle. And that's something that we've learned. So I sent Sky some worksheets, and that's really been kind of where it gets the conversation can open up more, instead of talking about just the use with your partner, talking about how it impacts the children. So there's going to be situations where people don't have children in the picture, and so this might not necessarily apply. But when there are children and there is that time sharing, or one parent has 100% or whatever it is after the splitting up, understanding, building that empathy with your children first tends to be very helpful in that honest discussion. So the safe.
I just sent the handouts again. So if you didn't, they're going through right now. If you weren't able to grab them last time, please grab them this time and save them.
So the first one is helpful questions. This is a list of questions that I usually hand to child advocates or investigators while you're meeting with the survivor, or someone who you feel or suspect could be a survivor, like could be on that power dynamic spectrum as a survivor. So the helpful questions kind of break it down into, trying to analyze who has the power, who makes the decisions financially for the household. What are some of the protective capacities? Like how do you safety plan versus how the other parent safety plans, and what does that look like? And when there is an argument, what happens? Trying to identify the pattern, right? And then the second one is helpful things for going over how abuse impacts children with perpetrators. It does, I believe it specifies fathers, but this one was created by, I believe it was Massachusetts, but it's still a guide that can be useful regardless of whether it's mom or dad, to start having that conversation. And I know that you all, are in the families and have it, have that experience with everyone. So maybe these are some things that you can bring into those conversations to start talking about and bringing it back to the safety of the children and the well-being of the children, instead of, as an entry point to then talk about the abuse at large. So the safe and together model assumes that that abusers can harm children. So that abuse in general harms children, even if it's not directly to them. And that assessments of risk and safety for children should focus on the tactics, should focus on what it is, those methods for maintaining power and control, right? And that it also understands that survivors are often being unfairly penalized by the system for failing to protect because of the failure of the system to fully understand their protective efforts. So something that I came across often while working inside ChildNet for WIT as an advocate was that kind of double standard where it was usually mom, was held to this standard to always be there to protect. But then whenever I would ask about what they were doing to follow through with the services for dad, they were like, not really, or we couldn't really get in touch with him, or he's not really in the picture, or he's not answering. So there is this double standard. So all of those things would be happening, but then right when it would come down to a court case or a court hearing, then the abuser would come back around and want to be in the picture again, right? But then that standard of being a parent wasn't equal. So we want to kind of mirror this understanding and this assumption and how we approach kind of like that case management part. And these are just some of the principles. I know we're running low on time. That children ideally should be safe and together. That's the name, safe and together with the non-offending parent. And that there should be a partnership with that non-offending parent to work on safety planning, right? Where the child's safety and well-being is at the middle. That should be the default. We could go down 100 different rabbit holes if we start talking about, what one partner said to the other in the fight and how they treat each other. But if we bring it down to the child's welfare, then it becomes much more objective and a lot more clear on what it is that we can do to change the situation of safety in the house. Partnerships also depend on the comprehensive assessment of strengths, again, leading to more effective plans, and then intervention with perpetrators, right? Understanding those tactics and putting those at the forefront instead of just kind of on the back burner, like, oh, well, he might take the car or he might not pay the power bill this month. So making visible those different tactics that are used so that those are included in the safety plan to help maintain, so that once the abuser leaves or uses one of these measures, uses one of these tactics to negatively impact their partner, it's not going to negatively impact the children as well, right? So because children's well-being is at the center, you can put into a safety plan, theoretically, that the abuser will not hijack the family car, that the abuser will not, or will continue to pay the rent or the phone bill or whatever it is, so that the non-offending parent can continue to take their children to and from school, to and from doctor's appointments, if that's the situation that's going on for them. This is
about this that I think is the big takeaway that I just want to highlight, that holding the abuser accountable for their actions, which is something we just never do. And okay, even if he is forced to leave the house, he still has to take care of his kids. Right. He or she still has to take care of their children.
Right. Yeah. And that's
those finances. He's not taking care of his children.
Right. And that's the whole idea, right? Is that you're held to the same standard. You're still a parent. You're still responsible for, under the Florida law, you know, you're 50%, you still have responsibility for your children just because, you know, even though you might not be in the home. So I'll just stop there and we'll dig into the other parts later on. But does anybody have any questions or?
Okay, guys, a lot of people can't open my attachment. I don't know why. I'll email it out. And yeah, do we have anybody want to unmute themselves and share anything, or, you know, takeaways, questions, anything?
I hear birds in someone's background. I don't know, is that you, Sky?
Yes. You know, I like to be outside with my birdies.
So anybody, like, a takeaway, something that, you know, you really, really stood out to you in this or hit home? Okay, well, I think that can conclude our training for session 2. I do appreciate everybody's participation. Everybody's saying thank you. Oh, I got one. The importance of having support and someone to confide in. Yay, that's really important. Yeah, everybody's saying thank you.
Awesome. Does anybody have something that they want to see the next time? Something that maybe I can bring?
I'd like to hear about the abuser side, like what's in their mind or brain, thinking that that's something, or that their behavior in their conversation about, acceptable, or they believe, or how do they believe this is okay, that kind of thing.
Okay.
Good point, Sonia. Good point.
So just real quick, so my mom was an abuser, but when I was in therapy for many years, but so when I confronted my mom years later to ask why she would beat me with belt buckles, why she would go after my dad with knives, why she ran over my dad with the car, you know, those kind of things. She said she never did that. So I finally realized that, I mean, thank God I can be the change, but her mental health was not good. And unfortunately, she was able to manipulate any kind of therapy that maybe she even attempted to go to, but it was never her. And I really still to this day. So that was a good question to know what like the abuser is thinking, because you know what, I just had to forgive her in my own way, and I really didn't have an answer for that. So yes. And yes, she abused the dogs and everything. So yeah, she never admitted it. Right. I just read what that person said.
Yeah.
So anyway, I wasn't going to say anything, but.
No, thank you.
Thank
You for sharing.
Thank you I know how hard it is for you to share and speak up, and you saying that actually, as you see, had other people, you know, comment on your own experience. And yeah, personally, self-disclosure, my mother abused me horrifically, like horrifically, my whole life. I can remember from like 2 years old. And I have a little brother who's 10 years younger than me, and she never abused him. Even while she was abusing me, she didn't abuse him because he had a different dad, right? And I have asked her why, and she did say because this is such bullshit. I mean, she did say because she had already developed her relationship with me, her style of being or pattern of being with me, and it was hard to change. And I just it was never, and she said sorry, but that still wasn't enough. And I still struggle with forgiveness because I haven't, to tell you the truth. And you know, my mom's also an alcohol drug addict, but I would much rather her just drank and done drugs and beat me. And so it's a really, really hard situation because we want that validation of why did you do this to me?
Right.
You know? So I really appreciate you sharing that, Abby. And maybe we can talk offline on how you were able to forgive because
Ooh.
it's hard.
It's very hard.
Well, thank
Okay,
you.
guys, it's about that time.
Thank
We gotta
you.
go. I have another meeting at 12. Abby, I really, really appreciate you sharing. I appreciate everybody that shared their stories, that had comments, that participated in the activity. And we will see you next Friday.
Thank you all. Have a good week.
Thank you.
Good weekend.
Bye.
Bye, guys.
Are we done? Guess so.